Okay, so what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at our first stack up example, and that's going to be the clearance stack up. Now, when we do this, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a series of blocks here, A, B, C, D, and we're going to see how they fit into this box. Now, primarily what we're looking for is we're looking for the space that is going to exist between blocks D and the inside of the box. So we're looking at that space right there. We're trying to calculate what that space is. So what we're going to do is the first thing what we're going to do is we've got a diagram of how it really works together. We need to note where we're going to start working, which is going to be the edge of block D. Then I'm going to mark some arrows on either side, and I'm going to mark my orientation direction. And this is critical for when we begin listing our dimensions. I want a clearance to be on this side of block B, so I'm going to put a plus sign there, which by default means I'm going to have a minus sign over here. So when I go to my Excel spreadsheet, you'll see that I have that set up. I've got the minus and the plus. This column here is going to be strictly for my orientation. Okay, this column here is going to be for my dimensions. This column here is going to be for my tolerances. And this column here is going to be describing the dimensions that I have. So I'll return to the drawing that I have. And what I'm going to do here, this is going to be my starting point. And if you imagine, I guess the way that I like to imagine stack ups is I'm going to imagine that I'm a tiny ant and I'm starting from this position and I'm basically walking through the components to eventually get back over to this edge here. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. So our starting position, as we saw before, is going to be this edge of block D, and we're moving over to the other edge of block D. Block D has a dimension of 20 plus or minus 0.25. So that's going to be the first dimension that I'm going to put into my stack up. And then I'm going to go ahead and type in a description, block D diameter. Now, since I'm moving from the right to the left, I'm moving in the negative direction. That's where this orientation comes into play. And if I haven't said so already, the orientation is the most critical part of these stack ups. If we do not get the orientation correct, you'll see later on it will not be correct. The answer will not be correct. Now that I'm at this edge of block D, I can move on to block C. There's only one dimension for block C, so that's pretty easy. I'm going to go to the other side of block C, and that's 40 plus or minus 0.15. So I'll go ahead and put that in there, 40.15. I'm going to say block C width. And again, I'm still traveling in that direction from right to left, so that is also a negative direction. Now, when I get to block B, if you take a look at this, and this is one thing that I want to make sure it's very important, we are allowed to use only the dimensions that are on the drawing. So that means I cannot go directly from this surface to here, which is where I want to go, but I have to go backwards and then forwards again. So this 10, since those are the dimensions I'm given on the drawing, that's what I have to use. This 10 is going to be my next dimension. So I'm going to go 10, and the tolerance is plus or minus 0.10. My description, block B, depth of groove. Now, since I'm going in the opposite direction, it's going to be a plus. Going back to the picture, I have to go from here to there, and now I can go backward in the negative direction with that 30 plus or minus 0.15. And that will be negative. Finally, I'm at my last block. If I look at my picture, I've gotten this edge of block B. Now I'm going to go to block A, which is 25 plus or minus 0.15. And I'm going from the right to the left, so that is a negative direction. Now I can go from this edge of the box to the other. Now at the beginning, somewhere in my paper, there is a dimension that says 102 plus or minus 0.75. So that's the dimension that I'm going to use here for the inside of my box. And that is going in the plus direction. Now that I have that, that is all my dimensions. I'm going to go ahead and make this underlined because I'm going to be doing some addition and subtraction here. Now for my tolerance stack up, this is where the orientation is critical. If there is a minus in front of it, if there's a minus in this column, it's going to be minus when I add this. If there's a plus, there's going to be a plus when I add that. So as always, when I do an Excel calculation, I'm going to hit equals to start. Since there's a minus here, I'm going to do minus, click on the cell that has the 20, minus, because there's a minus here, the 40, plus the cell that has the 10, minus the cell that has the 30, minus the cell that has the 25, and plus the cell that has the 102. Now when I go ahead and hit enter, there's my result. Okay, that tells me, if I go back to this picture, that right now I have a negative clearance. And if I have a negative clearance, that means I have an interference. So I will have to go back and fix those dimensions a little bit later. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and calculate my tolerance. So my tolerance is just going to be the sum of all these tolerances. I do not need to account for the orientation for this column. So I can just do equals sum and then highlight all of these values, close it, and there is my tolerance. And I'm going to call this clearance between D and inside of box. Okay, so we can see right now that we have an interference. So what I can do is I can make my blocks smaller if I like, or if I can make the box larger to fit the blocks. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and change, and that's the benefit of doing this in Excel. You don't have to worry about writing out the whole thing and doing the addition or subtraction again because it's already built into the spreadsheet. So if I change this 102 to 110, you can see that now I have a clearance. Now there's a case where I might want to calculate the maximum clearance and the minimum clearance. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that as well. Okay, for the maximum clearance, I'm going to take this nominal clearance and I'm going to add that number to it. So I'm going to say equals. This is the middle clearance plus the tolerance on the clearance. That gives me the maximum. And for the minimum, I'm going to take this nominal clearance and subtract the tolerance, and that'll give me the minimum clearance. And there you go. That is how you do your clearance stack ups.